So we were just talking about Palestine, and I think we've moved to the point where you started to feel a bit jaded with that movement. Well, not maybe not jaded, but it was limited. You weren't getting what you
Yeah, well,
needed.
I think it was inevitable to, it's a feeling I've had time and time again. But that's partly to do with me. I think I'm a bit of a fool, and getting super fired up and naively starry-eyed and enthusiastic about things. And then at some point, coming up against the reality, realizing the limitations, and then becoming quite sort of disheartened, and it does tend to happen. Tends to happen to me a lot. I don't ever seem to really learn, but that's just I think as much to do with me, perhaps even more than it is to do with anything intrinsic to the activist scene or any kind of
Well, I have heard it a lot from people going to Palestine. I mean, I don't want to name particular organizations that I don't know enough about, but I have heard a general consensus that there could be a lot more done, and I don't know if
There
you're
are
going to the
faults, but of course there are always going to be faults with movements like that. You've got to kind of say, well, this is partly how it is. You've got to find a way to, I think, if you're going to be in it, expect those frustrations and perhaps try to minimise them or work around them or do whatever you can.
So
They're always going to be there.
But tell me about your mentality after you were debating. You went away for the second time. You were sort of debating it after that, and then the third time.
Third time I went to Iraq, just after the ground invasion. Actually, December 2003, I went to Iraq. Right. I had a friend out there who was involved with something called Occupation Watch, and there were various little groups that sort of were hanging out together. There were the guys, those the Human Shields, they called themselves, I think. They departed from London on a big black double-decker bus, I think. Got as far as Turkey with that, and then I think they got held up on the border there. Made their way into Iraq anyway, and were doing what they call Human Shields, staying at various points in Iraq before the invasion. So there was them. There was a bunch of other people doing little projects, basically. Some people working with street kids, and so on. And I went there, and I sort of, hung out with them, really. I was also becoming a bit of a graffiti artist in that time, and so I went around Iraq spraying things on walls. That was what I decided I would do. That would be the activism that I would do. I sort of helped out in a couple of the things with the street kids and so on as well. But the art thing became my thing, and I carried that on into Palestine.
And that was just during the invasion?
Just after. Okay, just after the invasion, around about December 2003 was when I went there. I believe the invasion was in September time, September. There was a window just after the ground invasion of some months. I can't really say how many now. I'd have to really, look back and find out exactly, where you could sort of walk around the streets and eat in a restaurant as a Westerner. And obviously it wasn't safe, but it was before the real sort of insurrection, and Iraq really just fucking imploded. And then it wasn't safe for anybody, certainly not a Westerner, to be out on the street or even in a hotel without maximum security and big bucks and big money.
But at that time, you didn't need any sort of security.
Well, it would still be a good idea to have it because it still wasn't safe, and people still did get picked off on the street, kidnapped. And there were still bandits. There were still all kinds of things. But it was still possible. I took a train from Baghdad down to Basra, visit a friend, came back up. I mean, it did break down in the night because saboteurs had blown up the tracks, and I did get dragged off the train for my own protection by the local railway guards in Hilla. And that was a bit of a night. Making my own way back to Baghdad in the middle of the night that was a thing in itself. But I mean, that kind of thing would not have been possible a few months after that. You would simply have been kidnapped or just murdered straight away. Either ransomed or just killed. Probably some gruesome way. So, but yeah, there was that time, and so I went there for a few weeks. As I say, the art thing was really becoming my new thing at that point, and I carried that on into Palestine. And I had a new reason to go to Palestine. Then you see, do stuff with the international solidarity movement. Block tanks in the street, ride in ambulances, all that, negotiate checkpoints and so forth, but have my own thing as well, which was the art. And that really became my thing for the next few years, actually.
Oh.
I won't say the name I used because it's not something I really do anymore. But anybody who wanted to dig around could find out. Yeah.
All right. And so that when you found the art, did that give you like a new lease on life?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Absolutely. Yeah, yeah. Fired up and enthusiastic again. Yeah. I will change the world with stencils.
And as you say, you're not doing it now. So what happened? How far did it take you? And what?
I think I'm the sort of person who goes from thing to thing, to be honest.
Mm.
I loved it for a few years and then I got a bit bored of it. Stopped having the ideas. Got a bit precious about it as well, started selling things. And I think that just ruined it for me, to be honest.
Mm. Didn't want to see it.
I still draw, I still do stuff now and again, Every now and then I'll do something for, an activist thing or, or just for somebody's project, so I still do stuff, but, I don't really. Also, I mean, God, how much energy and discipline does it take to wake yourself up at 3 a.m, get on the night bus, go to that spot that you've, spent days scouted out, and done a recce on, get your stance to that spot. I lived like that for a number of years. Again, super consumed with the passion of it. I wouldn't want to do it now. I just wouldn't want to do it.
Fair enough. It's understandable. So you took the art scene, I don't know how to call it, but you took the art from Iraq to Palestine, anywhere else?
Lebanon
Lebanon.
as well.
How was that?
Lebanon was devastated in late 2006. Israel basically destroyed half the country overnight. I say overnight, over the course of about a month, or maybe not much more. It started with a bit of a clash with Hezbollah on the border, and that just flared up. I think one soldier was kidnapped. If I'm right, it was that guy Gilad Shalit. If I'm right, his name was Gilad Shalit. Recently mentioned on radio because I think a hostage negotiator was being consulted over the Hamas hostages. And if I'm right, that was him. That turned into a massive conflagration, basically Hezbollah versus Israel, and as I say, mass devastation. You could drive past village after village, estimated 80-90% destroyed.
Wow.
Bombs just lying around. Bombs hadn't gone off, just lying around. People picking them up, taking photos with them. And you go past these houses, half destroyed, and see families still sitting down to dinner inside, nowhere else to go. And the ground was like a lunar crater landscape, so properly fucked up. A good canvas for spray and paint. Nobody minded. I was invited actually by a group. I won't name the group. They're a big group, and they invited me to spray in the Dahia, which was a suburb of Beirut. And so I did some artwork for them. They were quite happy about that. I wasn't politically affiliated. I don't say I support particularly any group, but these are people that were defending their communities against an invader, and I thought, that's fair dues. I'll do artwork for them.
Wow, that's very cool.
There was also a group called Samidoun, which were doing basically emergency relief stuff, getting food and mattresses and medicine and blankets out to devastated areas. So I did a bit of stuff with them as well.
So what was the cause of all this devastation? There was
Israel smashed the place up.
Israel did it all.
Yeah.
Wow. And what year was this?
Late 2006. I was there in early 2007. So my friend, a journalist, was out there for the whole thing, and I went out to join him. I can't remember why I didn't go out earlier. I think it was just a money thing. I couldn't afford to get out there. I was waiting to get paid for something. I got out there as soon as I could. And yeah, did that.
And did that have any further effect on? Was that the last place you travelled for sort of activism, or?
I questioned my own motivations a bit. Again, I felt a bit disillusioned with myself and a bit, went out to leave. What did I really do here? What good did it really do? And so the thoughts I always have, really. But it was I can't say it was a good trip, can I? I mean, it's other people's devastation and misery.
If you had an impact, though, it must have been.
Oh, I doubt it had any impact, really. It had an impact on me.
I mean, you were invited. People obviously felt solidarity, and they wanted you to. They asked for your help.
Yeah, if you can call spray and paint on walls help. Yeah,
I mean, they did, and if they were an organisation defending their communities, then it's as serious as it can get.
Yeah.
But you were a bit disillusioned after that.
Yeah, inevitably. Of course, you have to ask yourself these questions. What good did any of this do?
So what did you find like when
Actually,
coming back?
I think it's all right to be a bit disheartened and disillusioned with other people's devastation and misery. It's the activist who's very self-assured and very complacent in his do-gooding that I tend to take against and have a problem with, to be honest.
No,
If
absolutely.
that
But
makes
there's a
sense.
balance. There's always a balance. You need to remember how small we are as individuals in this, whatever you want to call it, in the system. So
Very true, very true.
we have
So I
to
think
take what small victories we can.
part of that must have been.
Otherwise they'll break us. I've seen it happen to too many people. That's the burnout that you're talking about.
You're absolutely right. I think part of it is to do with ego, and it's very hard to acknowledge really that it's your own ego that drives part of that cynicism and that disillusionment. But I think you have to. You've got to try and be realistic with yourself. It's also that passion as well, the passion which gives you that such fervour in the first place. I think is also largely behind the disillusionment and the come down, if you like, when things don't go quite as brilliantly and wonderfully and miraculously as perhaps you at the back of your mind are hoping they will. But yeah, I think there's an ego side to it as well. And I've looked at so many other activists and thought, you're doing this and it's just about you. It's always about you. And I don't think I was completely innocent of that as well. It took me a long time to see it.
But to be aware of it is the best thing we can do. No other way to fight it other than to understand it. So what did you find yourself doing and thinking? Were you coming back to London, to England after Lebanon?
Yeah, I mean, don't forget, between Lebanon and my last trip to Palestine, nearly 3 years, 2.5 years elapsed. And that's what tends to happen with me. I tend to sort of have long periods out. Of course, I was doing the graffiti at that time, and a lot of that was political. A lot of it was just arty stuff. But I tend to sort of have long periods out. After Lebanon, I don't think I did very much for a while until let me see. No, I think it was just artwork really was what I did. That petered out around sort of 2009, 2010, and I didn't really do anything else. I don't think until the Rojava thing came up in 2014. So I do have these long periods of not really doing much. So that's why I don't call myself an activist or a revolutionary like you called me, because I tend to sort of dabble a bit and get into things now and then. But
I mean, there's not always
really
something that we can do. Sometimes the hardest part is just waiting.
No, but I know people that are constantly in for the long haul and very committed, and don't burn out. And really, I think those are the people who are examples. And a lot of what they do is thankless, and not necessarily with a lot of thrills and fireworks and so forth. And really, that's the sort of activism that's going to have impact, isn't it? More than just buzzing off to the other side of the world to get involved in the latest crusade, which I think I'm a bit guilty of.
Yeah, but I'm sure
and then getting sick of it.
So you're talking about more local sort of activism, or just someone sort of person that's running a charity for their whole life, or what kind of
all kinds, but I think it's that constancy which some people have and some people don't.
Well, consistency is very good and it gives you a lot of stability in your life, but at the same time, we don't live in a consistent world, and especially the things that we care about, the things that we want to change, the nature of trying to change that is always changing itself. So
that's true.
I think
that is true.
There's a degree of complacency as well. With you can get stuck in a lot of things. There's so many.
That's a very good point. Yeah, I think a lot of people, a lot of old leftists who are still going to the same meetings and still having the same conversations are very, I think, like you say, you're complacent. So that's the word I would use. They're quite actually, I think, happy with the status quo and with their little bit of position within that status quo.
I find that so much within, especially the left wing of this country.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good point, actually. It's a good counter argument to what I was saying.
There's a big industry to it, and I feel that it's important to be on as much as you can on the outside of anything like that, because all it leads to is complacency, in my opinion.
Hmm.
Comfort. You get too comfortable.
Oh, you've just made me feel a bit better, actually. Thank you for that.
Oh, I'm glad. So yeah, you said you took a big, long, brief period, and then Rojava started to come up. How did
Yeah, let's talk about Rojava, because that's something we both know a bit about,
yeah?
of course.
But how did you first hear about it? How did you get interested in it? And what was going on in your mind at that time after like, as you say, a big period of absence?
Well, Kobani, of course, was when everybody became aware of it, wasn't it? You know, those women with the colourful headscarves and the guns fighting from the ruins of the city. And of course, ISIS was the new bogeyman, wasn't it? The new international bogeyman, the new terror. And so those two very new, very vivid, if you like, characters were very much centre stage. And I still, you know, I had a lot of mates and friends, and old friends from the activist scene that I still saw and sometimes hung out with. A lot of them were, putting the word Kobani on their Facebook profile pictures, in solidarity and so forth. And so it was around at all levels in different kinds of media. And so I knew about it, and I had half an interest. And I think even before, quite some way before I actually knew that you could go and volunteer, and then decided to go and volunteer, I think I was having thoughts like, what if? What if? Wouldn't it be? Wouldn't it be? Something to go and fight for something like that.
Mm.
And then things come out, mostly in the mainstream press. I didn't have real contacts with anything.
Just before you get into that,
Yeah,
actually,
go on.
it's something that I should cover because it's something that's come up in and out throughout a lot of stuff you've been saying, but we haven't really gone into it. You've been living in London most of the time that you're not abroad, or
Yeah.
and you talk about like the London activist scene and that sort of thing. That's a very big and interesting topic to cover. Like you say, they would have people were talking about that and from that scene, and that's what got
Yeah,
you
but around
interested.
that time in my life, I wasn't really much to do with the London activist scene anymore.
Um,
I hadn't had much to do with it for years.
um, but just sort of tell me about that. What it represented to you in London, the this scene, this movement, and why you didn't
Well, I
have
was only
that much
really
to do with it.
involved in activism in London years before,
Mm,
and that had led to stuff that I'd done abroad, which we've
mm,
discussed. And so by this point now, the time of Rojava, I hadn't really had much to do. I mean, the graffiti was something I'd decided. The political graffiti at first was something I'd decided that would be my kind of activism, if you like. I went to protest less and less because I was constantly getting locked up and fighting with police, and near misses in court and so forth, and the occasional conviction. And I just didn't want to do street protests, walk from Hyde Park to Trafalgar Square, and then get involved in something because the police are behaving
So
brutally to someone again.
that's what it
So
was looking like. That's that sort of period to you. Because I just want to get a picture because would have been a bit before my time, maybe a bit before.
well, what I'm describing now is to try to sort of to give you a chronology. Um, is how I sort of moved out of direct action on the streets of London into graffiti, which I decided would be my activism, if you like, um, which then became just graffiti more about art and less about activism. Um, and so, again, by the time of Kobani, by the time of Rojava, I hadn't really had much to do with either of those things for at least 3 or 4 years. I'd also moved out of where I was living, a co-op in South London, and I was just living a different kind of life. So the London activist movement was a thing in my past, although I still had a few friends, or well, quite a few friends actually, who were still doing stuff.
But
Does that make sense now?
yeah, it makes complete sense. It's just to me, it's very interesting because like from becoming politically aware myself and okay, sort of thing, I would have never really seen an activist movement like that. But I think by the time I would have been politically aware, there was no real cohesive movement. Maybe there was the death of
Oh, there's been the Occupy movement. There's been the
yeah,
student movements.
which would again just be before my time. I think they were
Right, of
the
course, yeah. Yeah, I'm older than I think, and you're you're younger.
oh,
Yeah. So there was nothing, no big, no sort of street protest or direct action scene in London. You know, while you were
no, certainly not
at the
seen.
age when you
Not a
would have.
scene for it. It would have been. It would have survived only really on like campus politics, I think, and there would be protests, and the anti-fascist movement was still strong because that was organized enough that it
So
didn't
not
just
the student protests
peter
either.
apart.
Then.
Uh,
But that's single issue, I suppose. That's about
yeah,
student fees essentially, and
yeah.
you
I
know,
mean,
nothing else. You know,
yeah,
students.
I remember when they were going on definitely, but it wasn't. It certainly wasn't like an activist. Yeah, it was
Right.
just angry youth.
Okay. Uh, for me, that activism was always a bit overblown. Then, in that case, then, so to give you a picture of what it was like when
Mm.
I really was involved in it, there were sort of. I think we only really mobilised a few hundred at most, really, unless it was something big like say stop the war, in which case thousands of people would come. But they weren't our activists; they were just people. You know, we tried to replicate that huge Italian scene that did the Bianchi, but we got sort of 40 of us at most, I think, maybe 45, and so it was actually quite small. And although I think we sort of talked of insurrection and so forth. Really, we were no match for organised riot police and so forth. Some of the little things we did actually were positive. I remember at the time Argentina. I think Argentina had thrown out 5 successive governments, and it was a time of workers' cooperatives, and lots of people were getting very positive that that a lot of grassroots um, things were sort of taking hold there, and there was a potential for social change there. We planned an action to occupy the Argentinian embassy in London, and we rehearsed it, how we were going to get in, how we were going to get everybody else in, up to the balcony, switch the flag for a red and black flag, and so we did a few things like that. We occupied the offices of Sodexo, which are you must have seen their stickers everywhere. Big, massive company with fingers in all sorts of pies. What they were doing at that time was they were printing vouchers which could be spent by asylum seekers, refugee claimants. And the incentive for shops that would take them was that they could keep the change. So they're basically ripping off refugees. And we called ourselves Sodexo Screws Refugees for Money. We knew we were going to get arrested. We occupied their offices. The cops came, pulled us away, had us up in court. And we got some minor press on that. And of course, because we gave ourselves that name, they had to write that sentence in the newspaper. And so we did little things like that. That was our. But we weren't doing, big protests, which again were quite unimpressive, really, just because of the numbers we had. We were doing little creative things like that, and there was some satisfaction to some of that actually. And of course, the life at the time when we weren't doing that, we were either doing witness appeal and court support for people who were up in court or waiting outside police stations for somebody to come out, or we were raising money through benefit parties and squat gigs and imbibing and various things, and living quite a wild life really. So the activism thing wasn't just about the cause; it was a life, it was a whole, and that's what I was saying before about how all consuming it can become.
Yeah.
All my friends are activists at that point. I was completely immersed. So again, I don't know if there was anything like that when you
There was definitely a holdover, but it wasn't my generation. It wasn't like if people
all right.
from my generation would be becoming aware of that, it would be they'd gone to
Mm.
uni and they'd become involved in the student politics
And I
there.
suppose the squat party scene itself died
I mean,
with changes to the law. I mean, it still sort of
it's
exists in a
still
form.
it's still very strong.
Is it?
I can
Okay.
speak to that
Well,
definitely, but
it's just me that hasn't been to one for years then.
the scene did die off a lot. It never
What do
died.
you mean in London, in the city?
Yeah, I mean, there's still squat parties going on. Since COVID, there's been a lot less,
right.
but they're still very regular. Like before COVID, it would have been there's one every week
Right.
from some different sound system. Now, maybe
The last few I went to was quite either super organised and you had to pay quite a lot of money on the door,
there's still that, but that's a
or
different
super
scene,
scally
really.
and there was a lot of muggers and a lot of violence coming into the squat party scene
Yeah.
as well.
I can say for sure that from what I know of that previous, when it was more of a general movement and there would be all these benefits, like a squat benefit is very rare now, and it will just be for like someone's friend's charity if
Yeah.
it's lost. Eh, there's a few sound systems that are trying to bring that politics back into it, and they're having a lot of success, but the general scene has become very depoliticized.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. And in some ways, or for some people, more commercial, I
Yeah.
suppose. So it's a little bit like the about the legal squatters, like Camelot and those groups that pay people to keep squatters out of buildings. So
Oh
they
yeah,
actually
yeah,
pay
like the
people to
VPS. Oh,
essentially squat
that's
them.
become a huge problem as well with us. I mean, obviously the law in 2013 with residentials had a big impact, but
Yeah.
so many of the old school squatting scene has turned into the property guardian scene.
Yeah, sorry, that's the term, property guardian. Yeah, I was just likening it to what you were telling me about this very sort of semi-legitimate squat party sort of format.
Which is why that's why I'm so interested, because to me it certainly growing up seeing that kind of thing, obviously with my background, which is obviously very politicized in those areas. Yeah, it, as I say, there was a holdover movement, and it was a generation above and a couple generations above that still, but it was, as you say, it was much more lifestyle. It was them maintaining their culture, and to me, and to I think most young people growing up, who even start to become conscious of the sort of issues that we're facing. It, like for example, these people that would have been the top. I don't want to start calling out people in particular, but the people that would have been at the top of the like squatting scene and throwing these parties and big like F the system kind of people, they're the ones running the big festivals now, which are like the a huge part of the system to a young person growing up. Like you just see them the same as like
Of course, oh, absolutely,
police in
of
schools. They
course,
have police at their festivals. Like
sure.
it's just another part of the industries of this country now.
I wonder if these things always tend to go that way.
A lot of stuff does, yeah. I mean, if something can be co-opted and like sanitized and defined, then
Right.
they'll do it.